Networking, or virtual networking, is a core concept in the cloud. Understanding how to establish networks right is going to help set you up for success. There's a number of things you need to understand up front, and in my next video, we're going to cover them so that you're ready to launch into your first or your next OCI project. In order to create an effective network for OCI, you first need to understand the architecture of an OCI region. Now, if you watched my video, OCI for the AWS developer, this is going to seem like a bit of a recap, and it is. OCI obviously starts off with the concept of a region. Regions are broken up into one or more availability domains. Some regions have one availability domain, and some regions have three. Now, availability domains help you to build out highly available applications by spreading your servers and your components across multiple different data centers in one geographic region. And finally, availability domains are broken up into fault domains. Now, every availability domain has 3 fault domains there. Consider this to be like different rows or different racks of computers inside of a data center. So what happens is that a hardware failure, for example, is very unlikely to be able to affect something across different fault domains. And also planned maintenance is carried out about one fault domain at a time. So it gives you the ability to create highly available applications even within only a single availability domain. Right, so networks, virtual cloud networks are created at the regional level, and every virtual cloud network or VCN has one or more CIDR blocks. Now keep in mind that if you ever want to be able to connect this VCN to another VCN or your on-premises network, it can't have overlapping CIDR blocks with any other networks. So you do want to spend a little bit of time here considering IP address management for your VCNs, or at least those VCNs that are going to be part of larger networks. If you've got something that's obviously just a standalone test, you're fine, not really considering that as far as what IP address range it's going to use. But your ones that are going to be around for a long time and potentially be connected, you do want to take care of managing those IP addresses. Each of your VCNs is then subdivided into subnets. Subnets can either be public, meaning they have a two-way connection out to the internet, or private, meaning they've either got no internet connectivity or one-way outbound internet connectivity. Subnets can also be either regional, meaning they span across the entire region, across however many availability domains there are, or they can be tied to a specific availability domain. Unless you have a very specific region to go with tying them to a particular availability domain, then we recommend that you go with regional subnets. It just makes your life a little bit easier. It means you only have, say, one subnet instead of 3, for example. Once you've got your VCN in place and your subnets, you can add a service gateway, and that's going to give you connectivity out to the OCI services, such as object storage, directly, without having to traverse the public internet. It keeps everything nice and secure, and it means you don't have data exfiltration out into public internet land. Next, you can add a NAT gateway, and that's going to allow your instances that are in your private subnets to gain outbound access to the internet. So it's one way. It's the instances can reach out to the internet, say to pick up patches, things of that nature, but there's no way to address the instances coming back in. So it kind of keeps them secure. You'd normally put things like app servers in here, in our private subnet with a NAT gateway, maybe your database server so it can reach out to get updates, things of that nature. And then the final gateway for this purposes, for the intro class here, is the internet gateway, which is going to allow you to have bidirectional internet connectivity from your instances in your public subnets that have public IP addresses out to the internet. So you could potentially put a web server out, with a public IP address or something like that, a server that you'd want people to be able to access directly. That said, I actually recommend you put your web servers in a private subnet and then just have load balancers out on the public internet. Keeps everything a bit more secure, but yeah, it does give you that public IP address and that connectivity. And then the final, in the sort of default constructs here for networking, you're going to get route tables and security lists that govern your different subnets. The route table controls how traffic is routed inside the network, and security lists help define the hypervisor enforced firewall rules. Now, your route table will have entries in there to do things like there's a default entry that controls in VCN traffic. You'll have entries out to your net gateway, to your service gateway, to the internet gateway. And if you start peering connections with other VCNs or potentially your on-premises network, your route table will contain those entries as well. Now, if this all seems a bit complicated, and it kind of is, don't worry. OCI has made it very easy to get started, and we're going to jump into that next. So here we are in the Oracle Cloud Console, and we're going to start creating a virtual network. So I can come here to the service menu, select networking, and virtual cloud networks. You can see here I don't have any VCN set up in the default part of my account. Over here we've got compartments. Think of compartments kind of like sub portions of your account. So I've got a sub compartment called ASP.NET Tests, but I'm going to go into the main root part of my account. I've got two options here, create a VCN or start the VCN wizard. The wizard is obviously the easiest way to start creating a full-featured VCN for your account. So I'm going to click that. And I've got two options here. One is create a VCN with internet connectivity, and one is add internet connectivity and site-to-site VPN to a VCN. So that's going to modify an existing VCN. I'm going to start with this one here, create a VCN with internet connectivity. And this gives us a great little illustration of what it's actually going to create for us. So we're going to create a virtual cloud network in a specified region. We're going to create two subnets, one public and one private, and these are going to be regional subnets, which is good. Each of the subnets is going to have its own little route table. You can see there, its own security list there. It's going to create a service gateway, and that's going to allow us the external access from the private network out to the Oracle services, like the object storage and other services there. It's going to be a NAT gateway that will allow instances in the private subnet to access the internet. And then there's going to be an internet gateway, which is connected to the public subnet, and that's going to allow the two-way communication that I was talking about. It's going to set this all up for us. All right, I'm going to hit the Start Wizard. And we've got the configuration page here. So I'm going to come in, we're going to give it a name, test VCN. Then select the compartment. Now compartments, like I said, are very good for organizing your resources. You can actually create sub-accounts or sub-portions of your account. I'm going to leave it in the root part of in the root compartment for now, because I'm going to delete this later. Configure your VCN. So you're going to give it your very first CIDR block here, and I'm going to go 10.0.0/16. That's fine. I can optionally enable IPv6 or not. I'm going to leave it off for now. And use DNS subname host names. I'm going to leave that on. The next thing we need to do is define the two subnets that we're going to create, our public subnet and our private one. Now this is obviously a /16, so we're going to, and the default is it's going to offer to create a /24 for your public and your private. And I'm just going to leave the defaults here, but obviously you can start altering those to suit your needs. I can hit next. And then we have the review and create option, which is basically going to give us all the details about what we selected. Scroll down here and see, and then I can hit create. Now, creating a VCN actually doesn't take that long. I'm not even pausing this. You can see that pretty much everything is done. We're just waiting on the updating to private subnet. There we go. And created. And once we've done that, we actually go into the to the display for the VCN, and we can see all the details about our VCN here. We've got the default information, security. We've got no security attributes there, tags, and we can see the subnets were allocated for us. And you've got a list here of all the different resources that are allocated. So we've got 2 subnets, we've got 1 CIDR block, we've got 2 route tables, one for the private and then the default. We've got 1 internet gateway. We've got 2 security lists, 1 for the default for the private and 1 for the default for the VCN. 1 DHCP option set, a NAT gateway, a service gateway, and there we go. All right, the next thing for us to look at when it comes to VCNs is going to be the security lists. Here at the security list tab, each security list here is going to be bound to a specific subnet. So if we want to look at the subnets, for example, if I go to the public subnet, there's a security list. I can see the default security list for a test VCN. Now, security lists are like a set of firewall rules that are applied at the hypervisor level. So this is before anything ever gets to the instance. And you can see here by default, I've got 3 rules. 2 of these are related to ICMP, and it's to do with management. And the other is port 22, so that's SSHing into an instance. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the security list gets applied to everything that gets launched inside of that subnet. Okay, it's a combination of a security list and another construct we'll look later on called a network security group. Those 2 combined determine what is allowed through to the particular NIC that's attached. So by having this rule here, TCP protocol from anywhere, port 22 is going to mean that any instance that we launch in the subnet that this is attached to, so this is going to be the public subnet, any instance in there is automatically going to have port 22 open and allowed to connect, so you'll be able to SSH in there. This may or may not be what you want to do, and if it isn't, you can certainly remove the entry here. What I want to do now is I'm going to launch 2 instances into the VCN, one in a public subnet, one in a private subnet, so we can actually see what's going on and go from there. Okay, so here I am, I'm in the main console, and I'm going to launch an instance into the public subnet so you can see what's going on here. Okay, compute instances. I'm going to create an instance, and I'm going to say here public instance. Availability domain 1 is fine. Oracle Linux is fine. I'm going to use the AMD shape. VNIC name, I'm going to skip that. Primary network, so I'm going to choose the VCN that we created and select the existing subnet, and this is going to be the public subnet. I'm going to allow it to automatically assign an IP address, And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab my public SSH key, go, boot volume size, and I'm just going to go create. Okay, so that's going to launch a new instance into my public subnet so we can actually see what's going on. And I've set up my personal SSH key, so I'll be able to SSH into that. Now I'm going to pause this video and we're going to come back once the instance is completely provisioned. All right, so here we are, and the instance is completed launching, and you can see here we've got the public instance is the name of the machine. We've got a whole bunch of details here, and including the public IP address. So I'll grab my terminal window here, copy the public IP address, and what I can do is SSH. OPC is the default user. I did launch a Oracle Linux instance, so OPC is the user there. And then the IP address. And because I've provided my SSH key for my local machine, I can obviously go directly into it. And you can see I'm inside the instance. I can, perhaps ping. Ping my website, and I can obviously get out to the internet and into the instance from the public internet, because this is actually running here on my own machine. Now, the reason that we can do that is because, like I said, there is this default security group that is bound to the subnet. So let's see here. If I go back to networking, virtual cloud networks, and test VCN, if I go to my public subnet, the security list, again, I've got the public subnet allows any instance that's launched in there to automatically have a path through on port 22. So let's see here. If we exit, let's say I don't want every instance to have port 22 exposed and open, because it's kind of a dangerous thing to do, just leaving that wide open. So I'm going to hit remove. Now, once I do that, you find I can't actually get into that instance now because I've removed the firewall rule that allows it. And the reason that I've done this is I want to show you what happens when you combine security lists, which is what we have here, with network security groups. Now, network security groups are applied at the particular network instance. So here we go. I can go back to compute instances, public instance. You can see here the primary VNIC, network security groups, none. So what I want to do is I want to actually add a network security group, and I'll add the rule to allow traffic on port 22 in the network security group. That gives me fine-grained control. All right, so I'm going to go here, networking. VCN, network security groups. I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to say allow SSH. Next. And now my rules, I'm going to have an ingress rule. Source type is going to be CIDR. Now I'm leaving this wide open with the source CIDR of 0.0.0.0. Really shouldn't do that. Really want to have the CIDR block restricted to only addresses that we want. But anyway, we're going to allow this for the moment. SSH. And I'm going to go create. All right, now I've got security group rule. That's going to allow SSH. I'm going to flip back over to my public instance and go edit. I'm going to select the security group. Now, I can have multiple security groups here. So I can have security groups that address individual sets of functionality. Maybe I have a security group for web servers, for example, or FTP servers, etc. So I can do that, and I can pile on multiple security groups. All right, save changes. Now, once again, I can get access in there. So keep in mind that the access that you get to a particular instance is going to be the combination of the security list at the subnet level and the network security groups at the virtual NIC level. Those two combined are going to give you your access. It's not like you pass through one first and then the other, so you don't have to have the same rule in both to get through. Either one, the security list governs everything, and the security group is going to be much more specific. All right, now that covers what happens when you have a public instance inside of a public subnet. Let's go back here to instances. I'm going to create a new instance, and I'm going to call this private instance. Once again, I'm going to use Oracle Linux. I'm going to use the AMD processor. Skip the VNIC name. Existing VCN is fine. And this time I'm going to put it in a private subnet. And automatically assign a private IPv4 address. Paste public keys. Let's grab my SSH key again. Hopefully that's not going to work. So I'm not going to be able to remote into this instance because it's private. So what I need to do here is create a SSH key for my public instance. In, and then I'm going to say create. Now, once again, I'm going to wait. I'm going to pause the video and come back to this when it is finished provisioning. Okay, so here we are. Once again, private instance is now spun up fully. And as you can see, there is no public IP address, only a private IP address. And this one has no network security groups. One thing to be aware of, though, is we are looking at a different subnet. Test VCN subnets. So we are looking at the private subnet. And this security list still has access to port 22. And because this is private, there's no internet access. This is probably not as big of a deal as having a public server with SSH access. So what we can do is come back. Let's grab the IP address. Obviously, this is a 10.1 or 10.0 address. I can't SSH into that from my home PC. But because I'm here in the public instance, I'm able to jump into that instance. So, OPC at private instance, whereas I was in the public instance. Now again, because I have a internet, I don't have an internet gateway, but I have a NAT gateway, so I should still be able to get out to the public internet. And you can see there, I'm able to generate a connection out, in this case, an ICMP ping, out to my public website, and it gets back, the traffic comes back. Now, something else to keep in mind here. If we jump back to virtual, to the networking ping, and we look at the security list, again, we want to look at the default security list for the private, for the private subnet. These all have a default egress rule that's going to allow all traffic from all protocols out to anywhere on the internet. So that is why, for example, I was able to ping basementprogrammer.com. You may or may not want that. You might want to be a little bit more restrictive with some of your traffic. So you can always come in and remove this rule. And that should now block external traffic coming out. So if you want to be very selective, you want to block things that are going out to the internet, you certainly can do that looking at your security lists by removing those rules. Just keep in mind, both security lists and security groups, they only have allow rules. It's deny by default and then allow. So by doing this, by adding by removing the allow rule, we don't have any traffic that comes through. However, if a security list does get applied that does allow the traffic, the two combined will govern traffic outbound, and you will actually be able to send traffic out. Okay, so this has been the beginner's guide to the OCI networking, and we've covered a lot of ground in the basic constructs. You can set up a new VCN, know about setting up your subnets and your routing tables and your rules, and how to get access to these instances. And that's important for being able to get started with your first projects. In the next videos that I do on networking, we're going to dive into some more complex things like load balancers and how to take advantage of those to further secure your instances. So tune in. Until next time. Complete source code for all of my videos can be found on GitHub. You can find me there at github.com/basementprogrammer. Thanks for watching my video. If you found this video helpful, please hit the subscribe button. It helps you to know when I have new content out, and it helps me to know I'm creating useful content for you. You can always find me at basementprogrammer.com, on Twitter, and the Basement Programmer podcast. Details listed here. If you have any comments on this video, or you just want to get in touch, you can always email me. The address is tom@basementprogrammer.com. And I'll see you next time.